Hello and welcome to the Mental Minute with Michigan Medicine. I'm your host, Will Heininger, and we are joined today by a very special guest, friend of mine, Phil Johnson. Phil, how are you today?
Very great. Doing well. Thanks, Will.
Keeping busy. Phil is the head athletic trainer for the University of Michigan football team. With the student athletes not around, you still able to stay busy? Looks like you got plenty of stuff going on there behind you.
Yeah, I was gonna say it feels like this has not been off time. We've done a bunch of work trying to keep track of people, and using these cellular devices has been quite the challenge. But guys in different time zones doing different things, but still a lot of things to keep track of. So been busy, and then planning obviously for this whole hopefully return sooner than later to activities for the athletes has taken up a lot of time.
The athletic trainer, Phil's role is really who the student athlete sees the most year round because there are restrictions on other staff members. And so to have that relationship just go away or be severed because of the pandemic, that could be a real loss. So it's great that you're being able to touch base even, across time zones and so on. Thank you for doing that.
Yeah, that's a great point too, and it's just a change of schedule for guys, right? Of what they're normally used to, and then take and send them back home, and things get off a little bit. So yeah, I mean, between the Zoom and the FaceTime and those different platforms have been great. In addition to telephone, but just seeing people and be able to connect a little bit better that way it's been great.
Definitely. And just one more on that note, you mentioned, routine and, having a schedule, and there's not much more regimented routine and schedule than when the athletes are on campus. One thing that was cool, way back when I was an athlete and playing was realizing really what that routine sort of amounted to, and that it wasn't just, do this now and do this now and do this now, but how it all added up to performing, in our case, on Saturdays. And so one takeaway that I'm hoping, one positive that can come out of this is student athletes who are used to being so regimented and so regulated often by that schedule that they can maybe take a look at the recipe that goes into, their days, how they're feeling, how they're performing when it's not scheduled for them, when it's more on their own. Have you heard anything, in that regard, or experienced anything in that regard with respect to, regulation and schedule and routine, and losing those things a little bit during this time?
Right, and I think that that started younger and younger these days in the life of an athlete, of just everything is given to them or organized for them, that I think the guys being able to be autonomous here in this last 2 months, I agree. I think it's going to be pretty valuable. And it seems like most of these guys, as you touch base, they've still had their online classes. They've still had some things that provide some structure to the day, but they've also been able to, you know, coordinate when their workout time is, or when they can get that in, or when they want to do it, based on how they're feeling. So I agree. I think it's a great period of time for them to realize that not everything has to be handed to you like that. And, you can base things on how you're doing or how you're feeling. And it's okay to take a day off, and
Yeah, and to build
so
some efficacy in doing that.
yes, right.
So,
Yeah.
you mentioned staying in touch and using those devices. Let's go back to a time before those devices existed, and before a lot of the technology we rely on existed. Back to your roots and your training. Obviously, you got into athletic training. Was it something you were always interested in? Talk to us a little bit about your journey into the field.
Yeah, it's always great looking back and just the people that you come across and how you get to where you've gotten. So I grew up in Iowa, small farm town in Iowa, northwest Iowa, Akron, Iowa, shout out. Um, and ended up, high school athlete, loved sports and loved anatomy. Yeah, I was really into anatomy, weirdly enough. Would pick up anatomy books and just kind of enthralled by all that stuff and science and math. Did well at. So I was a senior in high school, and we had this guy, and again, 1,500 kids in my entire town. I'm sorry, 1,500 people, 48 kids in my graduating class. So we played all the sports, and both ways, playing football and that kind of thing. So my senior year, we had a guy that started showing up, this athletic trainer, I'd never heard of such a thing. And he would see our little ankle sprains or our jam fingers and, hurt muscles or bruises. And it just kind of, yeah, piqued my interest. So I started following him, observing him, and that kind of led me to pursue athletic training. And I ended up at the University of Iowa for undergrad and just went through the whole program there. And yeah, every day was just, this is great. This is great. I love this more and more each time. And I started off pre-med and then kind of, enjoyed college and kind of just started pursuing more of the athletic training part of it. But yeah, you talk about pre-cell phones. I remember graduating from Iowa and they said, hey, we've got this new thing coming out. And, and this was 1997. And if you want to use it, yeah, yes. So if you want to use this, we'll have this email account, and we had just gotten going with the cell phones. We're like, why would I ever email somebody? I can call them, So I was like, I don't need an email account. So ended up, I went to grad school for the next 2 years at Penn State. Interesting routes to get to Penn State, and but stayed in the Big Ten. They were in the Big Ten at that time. It wasn't that long ago. And then, but a great 2 years there and great people at Iowa, just looking back at how they help you develop as a person, and great people at Penn State, exactly what I needed, a little more structure, a little more discipline for that section of time and just learning. And then ended up doing an internship at the New York Jets. Was out there for a little over a year. And again, great people there, and just seeing that environment and kind of the difference in levels. And then, yeah, got married, didn't have a job. So I'm sure father-in-law loved that one. And then landed on my feet. I always say I landed my feet here at Michigan in the year of 2000, August of 2000. So hired here, and yeah, it's just been, there's great people here. Hard to leave. Had some various opportunities to look at, but very hard place to leave with the doctors that are here, the staff. There's been a lot of changes at football here in my time, but that has been educational also. I mean, there's been some up and downs, but it's amazing how much you learn in those down times, right? And you've kind of seen that.
It is cool to think that you've sort of been different places in the Big Ten and seen how things are done. And I can speak personal experience. You do seem uniquely cut out for the profession, and so I'm glad you found something that's such a fit for you. You mentioned the changes during the time that you've been in the profession, both for you geographically, but also in terms of the things that you guys pay attention to, mental health. I'm sure at some point, it probably wasn't even considered or covered in curriculum to concussions becoming a big deal. Can you just talk about the things that come to mind for you when you think about the progression of athletic training and within athletic medicine during your time in the field?
Yeah, I mean, I think when I started, it was kind of considered this, you provide the water at practice and do the stretching and taping, almost like lumped in with equipment manager, kind of just part of a program, and there wasn't a whole lot of respect as far as the medical side of things went. That's changed a lot. I mean, I think the curriculums that we learn from and just the education we get now encompasses a lot more of that, and people pay way more attention to it, being more of an allied healthcare profession, which it is. So that's been great, and a ton of change. I mean, when I was in school, we didn't even talk about high ankle sprains.
Really?
Since I've been at Michigan, concussion has always been emphasized and handled pretty well. Even when Dr. Henderson was here, we had a pretty good program, which has obviously gotten a little more sensitive, I would say.
Yeah, no question.
But hasn't changed drastically. I think the guys that have had head injuries here and the mild traumatic brain stuff has been handled pretty well that entire time. But you mentioned mental health, that has changed a lot, right? I mean, just across athletics, not only with just within football, that's become a much more emphasized thing, and rightfully so. I mean, at a perfect time in a young man or young lady's maturity, maturation, where they're trying to figure out things and A lot of them don't even know what anxiety is. They hear
Sure.
anxiety, but they don't identify themselves as being anxious, and just those little things of helping people kind of identify that and understand that, oh, it's okay to have anxiety, but here's some things that you can do to kind of help deal with those.
Right, make it adaptive positively. I mean, I know I didn't
Yes,
know what anxiety was as a freshman,
right,
at Michigan. And clearly, I've learned since, a highly anxious person, but ways to use that positively, adaptively,
right,
rather than have it derail you, which you mentioned the time period you're dealing with, the 17, 18 to 22, 23. All the ingredients are there to destabilize anybody mentally,
no
right? With
doubt.
changes in day-to-day routine, changes in support systems and sleep and nutrition. And so
Right.
just paying attention to it, I remember it feeling, almost like I had a cheat code once I learned and got, really great treatment and therapy through U of M. In my mind, I was actively training it like I was my body. It was kind of like, oh, no wonder it's all clicking. So I'm
No
glad
doubt.
to I'm glad to hear that you've seen the progression and how things have changed. But also the thing I hope that more leaders in the athletic community understand is yes, of course it's the right thing to do. We know that. Just like fixing somebody's ACL is the right thing to do if it tears. But it's also the smart thing to do to invest in their mental health and
No doubt.
not just reactively, but proactively, right? We do injury prevention. We do all sorts of things in order to limit the risk or the probability of missing time, getting hurt, not being able to perform. And,
Right.
I think John Beeline said it best when he said, well, if I'm going to ask a group of people to perform at a certain time, then their whole body needs to work at that time, including this part. And so it's
Yeah.
also a competitive advantage in maybe not just my opinion, but people who actually are, elite champions like LeBron and Russell Wilson. So I'm curious, just your reflections on that and mental health as something proactive and potentially used as an advantage.
Yep. No doubt. I was going to say that. I mean, those are great examples, and there's been that stigma, oh, mental health, and the clinical side of it. But I think these days you're able to reach out and involve more people through the performance side of it, right? Of just getting guys to and gals to identify, oh, these are stressors that I can do these things and do better with. Or sometimes, I mean, even for myself, I mean, you get through some of the mindfulness and some of the different educational things and techniques you learn, and just breathing, right? Of just relaxation breathing. I mean, I'm an anxious guy, and I got to go talk to Coach Harbaugh about something that I know is he's not going to be happy about. That can make me anxious. So, all right, just breathe. Just
Hit that Calm app for a few seconds.
yeah, shout out, calm. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of those things that I think, and I wish as a younger guy I would have known about, and just
No
emotional
question.
intelligence and just things that just help you down the road succeed more than you would. But I do agree, yeah, the performance side of things, and the more that the professional, highly successful individuals have been involved with that stuff has opened guys' eyes up to, oh, this isn't just sports psych, for lack of a better term, crazy stuff. So, uh,
Sure. Some of the
it,
misperceptions that were out there.
yes, right. But a lot of misperceptions.
So a few years ago, the NATA, the National Athletic Trainers Association, came out and essentially there was a paper released, a document released, but also guidelines released as far as you guys' that is athletic trainers, you guys' role in student athlete mental health care. You mentioned earlier talking about a little bit about collaboration and integrated care. And can you just talk about the role of the athletic trainer, in your eyes, in terms of a student athlete's well-being, and then, being able to collaborate with other professionals, other caretakers at University of Michigan, in your case, in order to best serve the student athlete?
Right. Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, I'm not a mental health professional. I kind of consider myself a mental health assistant.
Yep.
We do a lot of things, but I'm not a specialist in mental health by any means. But I'm a strong observer. I'm probably an expert observer of just guys in this age group and kind of how they're doing. But we've got a great group of people here. And as athletic trainers, that's kind of where we fit in on the front line of just helping identify things, paying attention, mood changes, just this guy's acting a little different, or also understanding the stresses that these guys are under, which is relatively extreme day to day. So, and sometimes you identify some illnesses, that are really based off a lack of sleep, and then the lack of sleep really exacerbates some other problems. So to identify that stuff early on is really helpful. And we've had since I've been here, since 2000, there's been a pretty strong program relative to the nation in athletics, and that started with Greg Harden, and the great Barb Hansen, who you're aware of. Now Abigail Eiler and her staff of people have really expanded it. And I'm taking a pot shot here, but I would assume or kind of guess there's probably about 30% of the athletes that just individually touch base with that department throughout their time here, and let alone just their impact for team training and that kind of stuff in the sports psych world. So very prevalent now. I think some of that stigma stuff, and you've been a great help with that too. I mean, the videos you had done and your experience here was being put out there has helped a lot also. Just, hey, this isn't a bad thing. This can be very beneficial.
No, I mean, in fact, when I hear the 30%, I think to myself, well, what if only 30% of our guys were going to the weight room, guys and gals, right?
Right.
And
Right.
so you want to derive those benefits.
Yep. Yeah, and I think the team environment, sometimes they can do those team talks, and that touches everybody. That I think then kind of brings in people too. And the clinical side of it, that's a whole nother deal that Michigan
Sure.
Medicine has great resources, and we do deal with that a little less in athletics. But at the level we're at, this has been a really good setup just to help the athletes as a resource.
Yeah, and you bring up something that I think is critical. I want to highlight is that you said, and that you are not the mental health professional in the sense that you're not tasked with, and it's not your job to do the counseling. Just like Abigail or Greg wouldn't do the treatment on the individual for an injury, but
Right.
if it were something that were affecting them and came up, they would refer the student athlete to you guys, right, to get well. And for those who are unfamiliar with my story, it was Phil's counterpart, Lenny, who saw me struggling when I was at practice and really near a breakdown, and just frankly came and put his arm around me and said, come with me, you'll be okay, we're going to take care of you, and walked me. And we talk about a warm handoff in mental health. When you walk them to the professional's office, in that case, it was Barb's office, Barb Hansen.
Right.
But having an athletic trainer know that here's where my role ends. I don't have to, do the therapy. I don't have to figure out the whole situation, but I am with them every day. I am aware of the stresses that they're under. And so whether it's a trainer or a coach or an academic support person, I think that's a model we're moving to, is making sure everyone knows their exact role in the protocol and where that ends, so they don't feel an undue burden or that they're tasked with something they're not trained to do.
Exactly. No doubt. And that's a great word to use, is refer. Dr. Rafat and the physicians here now, I mean, it is really collaborative of, as long as consent from the student athlete, it is, get them in a comfortable bubble and take care of whatever issues they may have. So they, because at the end of the day, they want to perform their best, not only on the field, but in the classroom. And, some of that's a big thing too, is just to, get over some of that test anxiety or some of those things that can be a roadblock in that part of the university also. So yeah, great resource overall.
Definitely. Well, Phil, we've hit on a lot of the meat and potatoes, so to speak, of this interview, but time to get to a couple fun questions. Is that all right?
Okay.
Don't mean to put you on the spot, but we wanted to ask, you've seen a lot of feet over the years. For those not aware, part of the observation Phil's talking about and spending time with guys is while we're all getting our feet taped and we say a lot of dumb things and the athletic trainers act like they're not listening, but they really just take it all in. And as you've heard, put it to good use to get us the help that we need. But they spend countless hours taping ankles. And over time, you've seen probably a couple of nice feet and maybe some not so nice feet. So the question is, who has the worst feet that you've ever had to tape?
Oh, I don't know if I should, I don't know if I should throw any names out there without consent, but we had a pretty speedy quarterback here a couple of years ago that his toenails got they were a little ragged. I think we started calling those eagle talons and kind of helped him with his speed. But there's been some doozies, as athletes, I think any performance, I got a daughter that's into ballet now that, your feet can take a beating and toenails and the toes. Whew, there's some that get a little rough, but I mean, fortunately for us, we've had some considerate guys that don't come in with the just straight sock rot feet going on.
Oh man, yeah, wash your feet, you guys. I feel like I was usually pretty good, but the cold tub doesn't do it. Just a service announcement. The cold tub itself doesn't do it. Ezron learned that the hard way after I got my feet taped. I thought it was good after the cold tub. So take care of your feet, you guys. Give these guys a break.
We usually like to provide some feedback if there's any issues. So
Yeah, constructively.
that's right.
Okay. And we've got one audience question. This comes from a legend. Goes by Paul in Saline. And Paul is somebody you would want taping your ankles, but perhaps not recording your score in golf if you were playing with him. Paul asks, Phil, if we replaced Tom Brady and Peyton Manning with you and Lenny for the Phil and Tiger pairings, what would be the pairings and who would win?
I think by handicap, you'd have to put me with Phil. So the Phil squared would take on Tiger and Lenny. And I think the Phils would take that one. Tom struggled early on with Phil. He came back strong though, as Tom always does. But I think I would have held up my own against Lenny and Tiger.
Well, Phil, we thank you so much for your time. I wanted to see if there's any last words of wisdom or statements or just words to the wise you want to share with the people.
I mean, go blue as always, and take care of yourselves out there. Yeah, this whole COVID time. I mean, hopefully people have taken advantage. And a few years ago, I got into some of the stoicism and some different philosophy and mindset things from that angle. And whenever you get these times of adversity, it's always beneficial. Take a step back. Look at the positive, find the opportunities that maybe you didn't have before, and attack those. I think there's always opportunity and adversity, and it's a big thing you see on the football field and within the football program. So always a good lesson.
No question. I think if I summed it up, the thing that I took from U of M more than anything is how to take adversity and then adapt accordingly. And it was such an empowering feeling because it wasn't, I know everything about everything. It was whatever I want to try, I can. And if there's something I don't know or that gives me trouble, I know who to ask. So,
yep, a lot of resources. This is a great place for that, no doubt.
No question. Well, thank you for being one of the elite ones within that group, and look forward to checking in with you, whether it's on the course or episode 2 here. But this has been the Mental Minute with Michigan Medicine and Phil Johnson.